ششمین سالگرد قیام آبان، نقشه مسیر جمهوری دموکراتیک در ایران، واشنگتن، 24 آبان 1404. جان برکو: من هرگز در گردهمایی شرکت نکردم که حتی ذره‌ای به شور، انرژی یا اشتیاق فراگیر و جذابی که امروز در این سالن به نمایش گذاشته شده نزدیک باشد. آلترناتیو پسر شاه نیست. طرح گذار 18 ماهه با امکان تمدید 18 ماه دیگر و نقش دادن محوری به خود در تعیین رؤسای قوا عملاً باز تولید سلطنت است. گذشته و آینده‌اش نامتمایز است و مردم ایران او را فرا نخواهند خواند. سنجش مشروعیت آلترناتیو بودن بر زمین است. نگریختن، سامان دادن مقاومت، توانمندسازی دیگران و پذیرش فداکاری. این همان است که سازمان مجاهدین خلق طی نزدیک به 4.5 دهه پی گرفته و هزینه‌های سنگینی پرداخته است.
Thank you for the unparalleled warmth and generosity of the welcome you've just extended to me, to which I don't know whether I'm equal, but I'll strive my level best. Let me say, Ambassador Sands, Congressman Kennedy, other distinguished dignitaries here present, and of course, paying obeisance and massive respect to Secretary of State Pompeo. It is the most enormous privilege to be invited to be amongst your number today and to be in the presence, perhaps not physical, but it felt almost literally physical, of greatness in the form of a political leader who is an example to women and all who aspire to political leadership in every part of the globe, and I refer, of course, to Mrs. Maryam Rajavi. Part of the joie de vivre, the raison d'être of continued life at my age is the occasional opportunity to experience something for which I can find no precedent. I have been actively involved in politics, my friends, and I think you are my friends, for 46 years. I've been very privileged to attend meetings, seminars, congresses, conferences and conventions in virtually every part of the world, and periodically been privileged to be invited to address them. I have to tell you that I have never attended, still less been asked to address, a convention that comes anywhere near to matching the electricity, energy, or all-engrossing enthusiasm on display in this convention hall today. And in addition to saluting each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart, I want to say this: I've been present for every single moment of this great convention. I don't say that because I'm proud of it. I've been fortunate, lucky, privileged to be, and I think two tributes are in order. First, to the NCRI for conceiving, organizing, and facilitating with almost military precision and clockwork efficiency the best convention I've ever attended. Secondly, my friends, is it not also appropriate to offer our salutations to the 5 panels whom we were fortunate to witness and from whom we learnt this morning, each and every one sparklingly impressive, invigorating, and inspiring. Intellectuals, academics, entrepreneurs, each added something, but I hope people will forgive me if I say, in that sea of unrivaled brilliance, why there were 2 that will remain with me for the rest of my life. And those 2 panels, in no particular order, were the women's panel and the young people's panel. People who've suffered, people who've refused to accept defeat, people who have kept going, being positive, radiating enthusiasm, demonstrating commitment, doing the hard work, standing by others. And when we talk about standing by and remembering others, let's not forget those distinguished denizens of Ashrath 3 who have sacrificed so much for so long in support of so many. Ladies and gentlemen, if I want to put it in 3 words, what have we got in this appalling government in Iran? We've got a failed state. A failed state. It is nonsense on stilts to think for a moment that there is no alternative. Of course there is an alternative. And the alternative isn't to appease, because these people don't respect weakness. They shudder only at a display of strength. So before I turn to the heroes in this debate and the sources of succor and encouragement and positivity as we move forward, allow me to focus on my second point, and that is what the alternative isn't. My friends, I don't want to be too unkind, but that gives me a little bit of scope. The alternative is not son of Shah. No way! This is a guy who's lived a life of luxury, toddled around the world with enormous resources at his disposal, having scuttled away in ignominy and disgrace from the ill deeds and the consequences thereof of his late father, and who now comes forward with a blueprint. How jolly decent of the chappie for the future of Iran. An 18-month transition to a new government, but with the option of an 18-month extension on the 18 months. And this is a fellow who, in all solemnity, without even a titter or so much as a smile of embarrassment etched upon the contours of his visage, he proposes to have the lead role in the appointment of the head of the executive branch, the head of the judicial branch, and indeed the head of the legislative branch. You know, it's sounding awfully like an old monarchy. I used to think this chap thought he was the prince over the water. Perhaps he reckons he's the king over the water. I know not. You know, the sheer audacity, the temerity, the cheek, if I may use, as my late father would have done, an old Yiddish expression, the chutzpah of the man. The brazenness of the conduct and the complete absence of any capacity for self-reflection, self-awareness, consciousness of the absurdity of putting himself forward as an alternative for the country. I say to Mr. Pahlavi, sir, I don't know you personally. I've borne up stoically and with fortitude over the last 62 years without having made your acquaintance, and I dare say I shall continue to put one foot in front of the other in my remaining days on this planet. But I hope I can say on behalf of all of you in this hall, Mr. Pahlavi, you have an undistinguished past behind you. You have an undistinguished future in front of you. Don't call us, and you can be absolutely guaranteed and sure in the knowledge that we and the people of Iran will not call you. So, my friends, I come to the third and final point you'll be relieved to know. What is the alternative? And in particular, what's the basis? What's the basis? What's the basis in the course of a political debate for determining what, as an academic might say, is the determinative yardstick of who should be regarded as the authentic and legitimate alternative? My friends, may I politely suggest to you that the most obvious and compelling source of legitimacy is being on the ground, not having run away, organizing resistance, sticking at it, empowering others, and conducting a life that is selfless, that is based upon service, and which accepts the inevitability periodically of sacrifice. That's what the MEK has been doing for almost 4.5 decades. That's why 100,000 of those wonderful human beings have been slaughtered by the regime, because they stand up to it. That's why 17 are on death row as we speak. That's why last year they engaged in 39,000 acts of publicity against the depredations of this most tyrannical regime, which, as has been articulated a number of times, per capita has the worst record for the execution of its citizens of any regime in any other part of the world. It is top of the league table of murderous infamy. That's the reality of this regime, and it's the NCRI and the MEK resistance units that have stood up to the regime. And not only have they shown bravery and courage and the indomitable power of the human spirit, but they have fought and are fighting and will fight for recognizably pluralist values. In short, my friends, we will win, and nothing on earth can stop us winning. Thank you.
پروفسور حسین صادقپور، دانشگاه هاروارد: آزادی هرگز از سوی دودمانها یا حامیان خارجی اعطا نمی شود. آزادی با فداکاری، مقاومت و تعهد خلل ناپذیر به عدالت به دست می آید. ایران نو نیازمند نماد اقتدار یا دین نیست. رهایی با خون و اشک آنان نوشته می شود که فریاد می زنند ما ایران را آزاد خواهیم کرد.
Hello, everyone. Mark Twain, the great American writer, once said, "There are many dates in a human's life which are important, but there are only two dates which are important in a human life. The day they are born and the day they found out why they are born." This is the struggle to free Iran. To free Iran from the yokes of the Shahs and the Sheikhs has been an epic struggle against the icons of authoritarianism and brutality. It has been a struggle to build institutions of democracy and the establishment of a plural and constitutional order. You may have heard it has been a century-long struggle, and that this narrative which I'm going to describe today will document it has been a story of bravery, unrelenting spirit of free will, and also diametrically opposed, a cautionary tale of opportunism and betrayal. At the end, what will unlock the riddle of Iran are lessons which are learned, and are learned by whom. The story begins here with the Sattar Khan and Babur Khan, who were technically the constitutional framers of the Constitution of Iran in 1905. It was the first Enlightenment revolution in the Islamic world, the very first one. It led to the creation of the first popularly elected parliament, Majlis, in the Middle East, only to see an opportunist, an Ahund, with aid from Russian troops, storm the Majlis, kill the movement, and butchery and enslavement followed. Many of you in the audience, especially the older kind, will know who Nouri was. It took another 2 generations. There was another first. Mohammad Mossadegh became the first democratically elected prime minister in the Muslim Middle East. He passed laws. He wanted to establish, of course, a government for the people and control its national resources for the people. The laws were going to make the world's first oil company, international oil company, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is now called, how many of you know this? BP, yes, British Petroleum, to be owned by the people and for the people. While it is now documented history that CIA with Operation Ajax in 1953 acted to remove Mossadegh from power, it was operationally only possible by betrayal of yet another Ahund, a Mullah, Abul Qasim Kashani, and with the aid of and his shock troops, the so-called Fedaiyan Islam, and of course by paid mobsters and mercenaries, such as Shahban Bimokh, which ended in the 28th Mordad. Mordad is the Iranian month, coup d'etat. Again, yet another tale of opportunism and betrayal. For those who are maybe interested in this internet dump, of the CIA memo, it reads like this: target Prime Minister Mossadegh and his government. Objectives: through legal or quasi-legal methods to effect the fall of the Mossadegh government and to replace it with a pro-Western government under the Shah's leadership. The CIA plan of action was implemented in 4 phases. This is how history evolves. Ajax became the first successful operation by CIA. It led to the downfall of Mossadegh, his arrest, and who eventually was brought to court in November 1953, and the Shah was brought back to power. And the CIA and MI6 had their man. And Iran officially became a client state. Absolute rule pursued. It began immediately in August of 1953 and went on for a couple of decades. Those who paid were the Iranians. Among them were the entire Central Committee members of the Mujahideen Khalq organization of Iran, who were killed in 1972. The man with the star, you can see, is Asghar Badizadegan, who was at the time on the faculty of chemistry at Technical University of Tehran. And here, as has been also alluded by several speakers before me, for those people who still harbor some romantic illusions of monarchy in Iran, this should be a vivid reminder. And then, of course, came later the killing of. These are just examples, okay? Every one of you perhaps could have equally well produced other examples. The killing of the Mujahideen and Fedaiyan members in April 1975, exactly 50 years ago. This particular one was orchestrated in a plot by a top Savak official whose name was Parviz Sabiti. I will come back to him soon. But people's resolve endured. It took a while, but it culminated in 1979 in the revolution against the Shah. Monarchy fell. You can see it says Shah Raft, means Shah left Iran, that is, for the second time. Not for the first, but for the second time. But before he left, he did one thing. On this stage, he demonstrated and proved to the people of Iran that he was forever the enemy of Iranian people. Forever. The struggle succeeds, but the will of the people is again, I will come back to it and why this happens. For a third time, it was hijacked by the genocidal mullahs. Volumes have been written about this and said, but not everything, of course. Here you would naturally ask, why does this happen? How does history act in this really cruel and weird fashion? In his book, The 18th Brumaire of Louis Bonaparte, Karl Marx famously observed that history repeats itself the first time as tragedy, the second time as farce. Okay. This profound statement, which is of course now in textbooks, as a meditation on the French revolutions of 1789 and 1848. First, the overthrow of the monarchy, then the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, was not only a comment on political recurrence, it was a philosophical appeal to the physical principle of causality. It's a bedrock of physics, the idea that every effect springs from a cause, and that history is governed by chain reactions of error and betrayal. Viewed from this lens, Iran's modern history is painfully instructive. The 1979 revolution, ultimately captured by theocratic despotism, began as a genuine struggle, an uprising, a collective cry against a monarchy that has turned into a modern tyranny. The Pahlavi regime, with its Savak apparatus, trained in the dark art of surveillance and torture, sowed its own demise, its own collapse. This brutality and arrogance of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi's rule created the very vacuum into which Khomeini and his political cohort surged, unleashing a reign of terror that endures to this day. Masoud Rajavi, pictured here, was only released from prison a few weeks before the revolution succeeded. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the cause and effect Marx has alluded to. Now Iran stands again on the precipice of change, when an evolutionary path forward from history, it actually exists. We have been discussing it since this morning. But as the saying goes, when the stars come out, so do the bats. This time, history not merely repeats itself, it spews the past. What it brings up is not a coherent narrative, but a toxic mixture of revisionism, opportunism, and betrayal, an amalgam of historical artifacts woven into the fabric of lies and deceit. A clique of grotesque wannabes, those regurgitated monarchists and long-dormant former torturers of Iran's youth, skilled in the art of deception and treachery, they are at it. They are the noxious mix of chemicals when history throws up. Men who have not held an honest day's job, not even an honorable graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven. One claims that he could not have been a torturer because he was trained in law. This is not only hollow, it is grotesque. History offers parallels, grim parallels. Hans Frank was a German lawyer before he became the Nazi governor of occupied Poland. He was hanged in Nuremberg for his crimes against humanity. Legal training is no inoculation against moral depravity. But finally, the long arm of the law at last may now have been wrapped around his neck. These unrepentant charlatans of yesteryears now make actually bets with the Revolutionary Guards. They harbor dreams of coronating the killers of Iran's youth. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the monarchist Machiavellian dream. Okay? This is their proto-model for ruling Iran. This is how they want to gain power. Question is, why? Why we may be here? It may be for the lessons that you and I refuse to learn over and over again. It is when we ignore these lessons is when and how we surrender ourselves to the vicious cycle of brutality and betrayal. What are those lessons? First, Iranians of all masses thoroughly rejected monarchy in their ranks in 1979, period. Lesson number two, that they paid in blood of Iran's youth, forged in the crucible of torture, rape, and execution. But foremost of all, freedom is never bestowed by dynasties on foreign patrons. It is earned through sacrifice, resistance, and unbreakable commitment to justice. These are not merely words for a class on politics, but these are things which are now being practiced. Has anybody learned these lessons? Is there really hope? Of course, in this convention, in this gathering, these are merely rhetorical questions, right? Why? Because it is here that history now acts as a distiller. Okay? Just as any parent knows that when a child throws up is the human body's attempt to rid itself of toxins, the current historical spew is a manifestation of Iran body politics ridding itself of the remains of diseased organs. This distillation is absolutely necessary to accelerate the progress toward the establishment of a free Iran. Now, the ultimate question is, as I also said at the beginning, whom does it? There is only one group right now, as we speak, which has crystallized all of these above lessons into action, into practice. It has a historically accurate roadmap for a democratic future in Iran. It has an evidence-based approach to resistance, and also importantly, it has a government which works in exile. Before I turn to my concluding slide, I like to sort of share a thought, one which sort of derives from my professional strength. Newton's third law is the bedrock of classical physics. Okay? All of those people who have taken physics in undergraduate, in college, I am sure must have seen it. In fact, you act it every time you get up from the bed, from your chair. Okay? It is the Newton third law that pushes you up. Okay? For every action, there is a reaction. Every reaction is a response to an action. We interrogate the world, this I do in my job, the universe, by the responses we receive from the interactions in the physical realm. To understand what Mujahideen are, what NCRI does, you merely listen to what the words the regime utters and how it reacts. Now, the new Iran will not have a need for an icon of authority, culture, or religion. Iran's liberation will not be paved with the ill-gotten gold of people's treasury, and it will be written in the blood and tears of those who shout, "We shall free Iran." Thank you.
گای بنسون، مردم ایران شایسته عدالت، آزادی و کشوری هستند که آینده‌اش توسط خودشان کنترل و ترسیم شود. منظور من جایگزین کردن یک استبداد با استبدادی دیگر نیست. هیچ تمایلی برای این کار وجود ندارد. غرب هم نباید هیچ علاقه‌ای به آن داشته باشد. آنها خواهان حق تعیین سرنوشت واقعی هستند.
Thank you so very much for inviting me to this gathering. It's an honor to be here with all of you today. My name is Guy Benson. I'm the political editor and a political commentator and a radio host, as you just heard. I appear on national news programs. I reside here in the DC area. What I can tell you, by way of background, is that I am an American citizen, but I was born not far from Iran. I arrived in the Middle East to American parents just over half a decade after a group of fanatics tragically seized control of your beloved homeland. My father has relayed stories throughout my life about the terrible days, for example, of the Iran-Iraq War and the very real threats Americans faced when we were living in that region. Many of those threats, of course, were traceable to the regime in Iran. I also mention it because I find it fitting and inspiring that so many of the important leaders of your movement are women, indeed one particularly remarkable woman. In an era in our politics of cheap posturing and a lot of empty rhetoric, Iranian women demanding freedom and equality is, in a word, heroic, true heroism. I'm here today because I unequivocally share all of your righteous vision for a free, secular, democratic, non-nuclear Iran, as determined and secured by and for the people of Iran and no one else. I believe that hope, real, justified, urgent hope, is warranted in this moment. Since October 7th, 2 years ago, the world has realized that the head of the snake of terrorism lies in Iran and has also seen the utter weakness of the Iranian regime, as well as the desire of the Iranian people to reject that regime and seek freedom. The regime has been exposed as a paper tiger. Or rather, the regime has exposed itself as a paper tiger. They are the architects of their own humiliation. While the exposure of this weakness on a global stage has been vital as a geopolitical breakthrough, I also pray that that embarrassment to the regime echoes and is echoing powerfully among the people who have been oppressed by that regime for so long. A regime that abuses them, imprisons them, tortures them, murders them, and for what? To steal and spend untold resources on a nuclear program that has been dealt a massive, crippling blow, on terror proxies that are falling and collapsing like dominoes. Their propaganda is also imploding. Their bravado has been punctured. So for all the evil that you have witnessed and your loved ones have witnessed through the years, through the decades, and that the world has seen over the last 2 years in particular, these have been catastrophic strategic blunders by the regime. Not swapping one form of tyranny for another, mind you. Others have spoken to that, including the Speaker. There's no appetite for that. There should be no interest in the West for that. But rather genuine self-determination, something that we take for granted in this country. We have no idea sometimes how fortunate we are, and we should be inspired by the sacrifice of people in your country who are striving for what we have. This is what free people everywhere must wish for the oppressed people all across the globe. Anyone who professes to stand for human rights or for women's rights or fighting against tyranny, I believe among those people, it is a moral requirement to speak out against the regime in Iran and on behalf of the people of Iran. on behalf of those who are oppressed and intimidated and assaulted and executed for supposed crimes as decreed by an evil, illegitimate cabal that rules through fear and without the consent of the governed. A bipartisan majority. For those of you who pay attention to American politics, you know bipartisan majorities aren't always guaranteed these days. But a bipartisan majority of the U.S. House of Representatives is behind you, as expressed in House Resolution 166. Many of you are familiar with that. It is a morally clear and powerful document. It has the backing of a majority of our House of Representatives across party lines. How fantastic. Nothing in life and nothing in history is permanent. I'm sure that through the decades since 1979, some critics have urged dissidents, and people like you, members of the Iranian diaspora, to just maybe move on. Resistance is futile. That has certainly been the message from the regime. The despots have always counted on despair and indefinite submission achieved through coercion. And to your immense eternal credit, you've never acquiesced. You've never given that submission to them. The submission that they demanded, you have refused. One must never merely shrug or surrender to complacency, especially as it relates to something about which one cares deeply. You all have never stepped aside. You have never walked away. You have never disengaged. And now, after so many years of setbacks and anguish and death, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that the tide has turned. And justice is not just remotely plausible, but increasingly realistic. So my parting prayer is this: that in our lifetimes, we will gather together again for precisely this sort of conference. And we won't do it here in Washington, D.C. We won't do it in New York. We won't do it in Paris. We won't do it in Brussels. We will do it in a free, thriving Tehran. And God willing, not if, but when we have that gathering in Tehran, we will have a conversation not about what might be, but what has already been achieved. Thank you very much.